Really, Paul, everything's taken out of context and misrepresented. That's what you're saying in your most recent article over the fact that the Southern Poverty Law Schools essentially called you out on your bullshit. Paul Elam, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is the runner of the site A Voice for Men. And this is a site that will be linked in the low bar if anybody really wants to go see it. But you can see firsthand the kind of bullshit that goes on here. But something that the MRAs, John the Other, Paul Elam, Rocking Mystery are always complaining about is things are being mischaracterized and taken out of context. Bullshit. Bullshit. Like everything else on your sites, it's nothing but a fucking lie. A lie wrapped up in a conspiracy, deep fried in a paranoid government operation to essentially destroy men. And for all of that, you guys don't offer any solid numbers in your favor. We already offered solid numbers in our favor, and we continue to offer solid numbers in our favor. And I've noticed that not one comment in any of the videos that have gone up against these assholes, like Paul Elam and John the Other and other MRAs, none of them have bothered to refute the actual numbers. And then they'll make a claim like, well, men don't report it because they're afraid of being... Yeah, they're afraid of being jumped on by assholes like you. But even then, it's not going to happen as often. It just doesn't. The dynamics between men and women usually don't allow for such a thing. It can happen now and then, but it's generally a special circumstance thing. And when it does happen, people should report it. But these faux numbers you keep throwing out, so, well, then a lot of it goes unreported. That doesn't matter. Okay, scientifically. Let's discuss scientifically here. If those numbers aren't reported, they don't exist. Period. You have to get the numbers. If you don't, you're screwed. So instead of complaining about how awful women are treating you, why don't you go out and try to start rounding up some of these numbers in a realistic manner? Create an organization that allows men to speak freely about such things. Also, you need to demonstrate that there's actual bias in the courts, which there isn't. Turns out that there's, even when the woman is capable of fully capable of raising the children, and the husband has a possible domestic abuse history in his favor, she's still no more or less likely to get the custody of the children. That's in the Southern Poverty Law School article also. This is the information that needs to be addressed by you and your cadre of miscreants. The problem is, up till now, no one's held you to any kind of a standard. So, this is what I intend to do. Every time one of you assholes makes a claim, I want you to cite it in some sort of peer-reviewed source. I will then review the source, read the information, and decide whether or not it has been placed in context. Because I know that you assholes like taking everything out of context. You have to. It's the only way to push your agenda, and that's what it is. It's a political agenda. It's a political agenda to essentially justify the hatred of women. And there is no distinction between the hate and the grassroots campaigning, because none of you ever really talk about men's issues. You just talk about how awful Western women are and how spoiled they are and how sexually irresponsible they are in terms of what was talked about in John the Other's article the other day. And it's a cover for the hate. It's a cover for obvious hatred. And people who've dealt with you know that. We've known it for a long time. We can see the Emperor's New Clothes in its naked aggression towards women. So what is accomplished by all of this? What do you intend to do? What's your end goal? Having a law to where if you jack your wife in the jaw, you don't go to jail for it? Okay, well then I want a law where I can jack you in the jaw for jacking your wife in the jaw. Better yet, I get to have a law where I can zap people at random with a cattle prod that I feel have offended me. Does that sound reasonable to you? Sounds reasonable to me, because I got a lot of motherfuckers that need to be zapped with a cattle prod. The people on the Ask Men side alone, A Voice for Men side alone, I would be busy for several weeks. So let's not pretend like this is anything other than a hate group or a hate mongering group, which we've known for a while. What ultimate damage can this cause? Well, certainly I bet that you could find yourself in a situation where these people are allying themselves with evangelical Christians, and before you know it, you have laws not only that the woman cannot have control over her own autonomy, but she has to carry a pregnancy she doesn't want. And folks, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it, and people can disagree with it or not. I do think that this is something that should be left to the woman, because she has to deal with all the consequences of it. The male does not. The male can vanish without a trace. He doesn't have to pay child support if he can get out of it. He can even just stop working. Now, somebody talked about them being thrown into prison for that. I don't agree with that. But at the same time, I don't agree with them deliberately not getting a job so they don't have to pay child support, or getting paid under the table, or just simply refusing to do it and nothing being done about it. Because that happens constantly too. I know, because I have had many friends who have complained about it, where the ex-spouse just vanishes or refuses to pay or do anything of that nature. So this is a problem at a societal level, not just a male-female dynamic problem. Not to mention that pregnancies can, regardless of how routine they usually are, have life-threatening repercussions for the female. Gestational diabetes alone can cause problems. Not to mention blood clots and hormonal imbalances and things of this nature. So yeah, I think it should be predominantly the woman's decision, because she has to deal with all the repercussions of carrying the pregnancy to term, which can be life-threatening in and of itself. She has no guarantee that the spouse will be around or that they will pay child support. More often than not, women aren't getting pregnant on the slide. They're getting pregnant by people that they think they love. And both parties may indeed think they love one another until they realize that they can't stand each other and they go their separate ways. So, what are we really talking about here? Well, first of all, people shouldn't be having children with people that they barely know, regardless if they're male or female. That's a good start. That starts with female and male contraception. Responsibility on both. Secondly, I think that you need to stop couching this in the language of somehow, okay, well, you don't have a say in it. Yeah, but your answer, and somebody mentioned this earlier, I don't have a say in the reproductive future of a child. No, you don't have a say in it, but you want to take her say away also. So who really is going to have the equal opportunity here? In other words, if you are valid in your assertion that you should be allowed to decide whether or not the pregnancy is carried to term, you cannot, in doing so, not violate the rights of the woman. In other words, she doesn't want to do it. So whose word has the predominant part here? Who has the greater right to decide such a thing? To me, it's the woman, because, as I said, she suffers all the consequences of said pregnancy. Not to mention the lost wages and the having to raise a kid on her own, usually, because the man doesn't have to do all that all the time, especially if she's got custody. Kids are damn expensive. They can get sick. That can devastate someone financially also. There could be premature birth. These are things that can happen to the woman that the man isn't going to have to deal with. He can get an out. So I don't buy this argument that, well, I should have a say in it too. No, I don't think you should. Because then you override her ability to have autonomy in the situation, where she's the one taking all the risk. Now, especially for the libertards out there, the right-wing reactionaries, who are so obsessed with people and risk and things like this. The fact that some of them would be willing to essentially rip that autonomy away from somebody tells me a lot about what they really think. But also, it tells me what this is all really about. These people, these men, want the 50s back. They want the days back when they could tell their wife to do whatever, and she didn't have a choice in it. Because to them it's a simpler time. They can get away with smacking the kid in the face. And it's not coming back. Those days are done. They should have never come into existence in the first place. And for large parts of human history, they didn't exist. The Abrahamic religions and Roman society all sort of left us that legacy. And it's not a legacy that was shared by the rest of the world in time and place. Although in some areas it was. But we can get into that later. However, I do not think that the male should have the predominant say in the reproductive rights of the woman. For the reasons I've already named. She is taking all the risk. Financial, physical, mental. Andrea Yates, who drowned her 5 children in Texas, was a schizophrenic and mentally ill woman who became manically depressed because her religiously fundamentalist husband insisted that she have one kid after another, that they take whatever kids God gave them. The poor woman ended up overwhelmed, and she was already mentally ill. She was convinced she was a bad mother, and the voices were confirming that in her mind. So she drowned them, believing it was the only way to protect them, the only way to save their souls from her bad mothering. Now, although her husband had no legal right to force her to do this, he used religion to essentially strip her of her rights and her autonomy. And this is something that religion is actually quite good at, regardless of where it's from. The result was 5 lives lost, 6 if you count Andrea's, because she's now in prison. And she is a very sick woman. She doesn't need to be in prison. She needs to be in a state hospital. The consequences of these kind of things are not looked at in those terms by someone like an MRA. All he cares about is the fact that somebody is telling him he can't do something, like smack his 4-year-old daughter in the mouth because she licked his hand and bloodied her mouth, and that's what what's his name, Bold, did to his daughter. How is that an appropriate response from an adult? It's no wonder kids in this country can't handle shit. It's no wonder they act like spoiled kids all the time. They see their parents acting like spoiled kids all the time. They see this kind of bullshit all the time. They read this kind of bullshit. This selfish, ignorant stupidity that never considers beyond the scope of a very limited range. In the meantime, those who see a little bit further have to deal with the consequences. Does the man have a say in whether or not the woman has an abortion? No. Why? He's not taking the risk. She is. And I think it needs to stay that way. Now, if somebody gets upset about that and doesn't like it, fine. You can be upset about it and not like it all you want. Still stands. It's my judgment call. And I think it makes sense. I've seen the results of what can happen when broken homes occur. The first step would be responsible contraception. That's not always possible in some states because we have a lot of religious nuts in charge in those states who won't give anybody any kind of contraception. So, the second part is then the responsibility of the 2 individuals involved. Man and woman both. The funny part is that many of the women that are being called sluts are some of the most responsible people. Yes, they may have many partners, but who really gives a shit? They are not harming anyone. So they need to get with the program. And not when I say they, I mean the MRAs. Stop attacking people for the wrong reasons. Start advocating for men, not for hate, because I haven't seen that just yet. Try it. You may like it.